She was supposed to be invisible. For 5 years, Naomi Brooks had cleaned the marble floors of the Langston Grand Hotel without anyone suspecting that the quiet night janitor held a doctorate in linguistics and could speak 9 languages fluently. Her plan was perfect. Hide in plain sight, stay unnoticed, and search for her missing sister Lena from the shadows. But plans have a way of unraveling at the worst possible moments, and hers began to crumble the instant hotel CEO Christopher Langston overheard her speaking perfect Dutch to a crying child, followed by German to confused tourists, then Mandarin to frustrated business guests, all in the span of 10 minutes. Suddenly, the man who owned the building where she'd built her fortress of anonymity was asking dangerous questions, and Naomi knew that the careful balance between safety and secrecy was about to shatter. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Naomi Brooks adjusted her cleaning cart for another night at the Langston Grand Hotel. At 11:30 p.m., the marble lobby gleamed under the soft amber lighting, and the faint sounds of late-night conversations drifted from the hotel bar. She moved with quiet efficiency, her movements practiced after 5 years of working the night shift. "Evening, Ms. Languages," Jorge called out from behind the concierge desk, his voice carrying a playful warmth. The young bellboy was one of the few staff members who stayed this late, helping guests with their luggage and late check-ins. His nickname for her had started as a joke after he'd heard her mumble corrections to poorly translated signs around the hotel. "Good evening, Jorge," Naomi replied with a gentle smile, pulling her supply cart toward the elevator banks. "How's your English practice coming along?" "Better every day, thanks to you," he said, straightening his burgundy vest. "Maybe someday I'll sound as smart as you do when you talk to those foreign guests." Naomi's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "You already sound plenty smart. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." As she began her rounds on the 15th floor, Naomi listened to the soft murmur of voices from behind hotel room doors. A German businessman was arguing with someone on the phone about delayed shipments. Down the hall, a French couple was planning their itinerary for tomorrow in hushed tones. Near the elevator, she overheard 2 Japanese tourists struggling to communicate with room service about their dietary restrictions. Without thinking, Naomi approached the Japanese guests. "Excuse me," she said in perfect Japanese. "I couldn't help but notice you were having trouble. The kitchen can prepare vegetarian meals if you call extension 427 and ask for the dietary accommodation menu." The elderly woman looked surprised and grateful. "Arigato gozaimasu. Your Japanese is excellent. Are you from Japan?" "No, but I studied there briefly," Naomi replied, then quickly excused herself before they could ask more questions. She'd learned to keep these interactions short. 3 floors down, she noticed a small error on the multilingual evacuation sign near the stairwell. The Arabic translation was incorrect, a potentially dangerous mistake. She made a mental note to mention it to maintenance in the morning, though she'd have to be careful about how she phrased her concern. Meanwhile, on the 42nd floor, Christopher Langston stepped out of the elevator with visible frustration etched across his face. His dinner meeting with the Swiss investment group had ended abruptly when their translator failed to show up, leaving both parties unable to properly communicate the finer details of their proposed partnership. At 38, Christopher had built the Langston Hotel empire through careful attention to detail and personal relationships with international clients. Tonight's failure felt like a significant setback. He loosened his tie as he walked toward his private office, intending to review some contracts before heading home. The hallway was quiet except for the distant sound of a vacuum cleaner running somewhere below. Christopher valued the late-night solitude of his hotel. It gave him time to think without the constant interruptions of daily operations. As he passed the children's sitting area near the family suites, he heard a soft voice speaking what sounded like Dutch. Curious, he slowed his pace and peered around the corner. A young girl, maybe 8 years old, was sitting alone on one of the small couches, tears streaming down her face. Kneeling beside her was a woman in a janitor's uniform, speaking in gentle, fluent Dutch. "It's okay, sweetheart. Naomi was saying. I know you're scared because you can't find your parents, but the nice people at the front desk are helping look for them. The little girl looked up with wide eyes. You speak Dutch? But you don't look like you're from Holland. Naomi smiled. Warmly. I speak your language. Actually, I speak 9 languages. Would you like me to teach you how to say help in English so you can ask for assistance if you need it again? Christopher stepped closer, intrigued. He'd never seen any of his cleaning staff interact with guests in foreign languages, and certainly not with such natural fluency. 9 languages? The girl asked, her tears slowing. Dutch, English, French, German, Spanish, Japanese, Mandarin, Arabic, and Russian. My favorite is the one we're speaking now because it sounds like music. The child giggled for the first time since her parents had left for the hotel spa, not realizing she couldn't go with them. Christopher watched as Naomi patiently taught the girl a few English phrases, then helped her use the house phone to call the front desk in English. Within minutes, the girl's parents arrived, apologizing profusely in Dutch for the confusion. Naomi translated their concerns to the front desk staff, ensuring they understood the family's needs going forward. As the family headed back to their room, Christopher emerged from the shadows. Excuse me, he said, approaching Naomi as she returned to organizing her cleaning supplies. She looked up, startled to see the CEO of the hotel chain standing before her. Mr. Langston, I'm sorry, I was just helping. Don't apologize, he said, studying her face. I'm curious about something. You said you speak 9 languages? Naomi's expression became guarded. I pick up languages easily. Is there a problem? With me helping guests? No problem at all, I'm just impressed. Christopher switched to French. Parlez-vous vraiment français couramment? Without hesitation, Naomi responded in perfect French. Oui, je parle français couramment. J'ai vécu à Paris pendant 1 an. Christopher's eyebrows rose. He tried German next. Und Sie sprechen auch Deutsch? Ja, natürlich, she replied smoothly. Deutsch war eigentlich eine meiner ersten Sprachen. Switching to Mandarin, Christopher continued his test. Ni shende hui juzong yuyan ma? Shide wo hui juzong yuyan. Ni shangting na yizong? Naomi replied, then added with a slight smile, though your Mandarin pronunciation could use a little work on the tones. Christopher stood there momentarily speechless. In 30 years of international business, he'd rarely encountered someone with such natural linguistic ability, let alone someone working as a janitor in his hotel. Where did you learn all these languages? Naomi's demeanor shifted, becoming more closed off. I've always been good with languages. I should get back to work now. Wait, Christopher said, but Naomi was already moving toward the elevator with her cart. I'd like to talk more about this. Maybe you could help with some of our international guest services. I'm fine with my current position, thank you, Naomi said firmly, stepping into the elevator. The doors closed before Christopher could respond further. He stood alone in the hallway, replaying the conversation in his mind. There was something about her manner of speaking, her vocabulary, the subtle confidence in her linguistic corrections, that suggested formal education. Yet according to his mental image of the staff roster, she was listed simply as night custodial staff. 20 minutes later, Christopher found Jorge restocking brochures in the lobby. Jorge, can I ask you something about Naomi? Jorge looked up, slightly nervous about being approached by the CEO. Naomi? She's great, Mr. Langston. Really helpful with the guests, always professional. How long have you known her? About 3 years since I started working here. She helped me with my English when I was struggling to communicate with guests. She's incredibly smart. What do you know about her background? Jorge shrugged. Not much. She keeps to herself mostly, but I've seen her help guests in all kinds of languages. Spanish, French, some Asian languages I don't recognize. The other staff started calling her our unofficial translator. He paused, then added, Don't let the uniform fool you, Mr. Langston. She's probably the most brilliant person working in this building. Christopher nodded thoughtfully. Has she ever mentioned wanting to work in a different capacity? Guest services, perhaps? I asked her about that once. She said she prefers working nights, likes the quiet, but honestly, I think she's overqualified for cleaning floors. Later that night, After the hotel had settled into its quietest hours, Naomi made her way to the employee break room in the basement. The space was empty except for the hum of vending machines and the distant sound of the building's ventilation system. She moved to locker number 847, far in the corner, and carefully entered the combination. Inside, behind her spare uniform and a few personal items, was a small locked box. Naomi glanced around to ensure she was alone, then opened it with a tiny key she wore on a chain around her neck, hidden beneath her work shirt. The box contained items that didn't match her current life. A worn leather journal filled with notes, in multiple languages, several outdated ID badges from international organizations, and a collection of newspaper clippings about a missing woman. The woman in the photos looked remarkably similar to Naomi, but with longer hair and professional attire. The name under the photos read, Dr. Lena Brooks. Naomi touched one of the clippings gently, her finger tracing over a headline from 3 years ago. UN linguist disappears following classified project leak. She opened the journal and made a brief entry in what appeared to be coded text, mixing Russian characters with Arabic script. As she prepared to close the box, she noticed something new had been slipped through the vents of her locker. A postcard, with a Bangkok skyline, lay on top of her uniforms. There was no postmark, no stamp, and no return address. On the back, written in precise Cyrillic script, were the words, Onav Soisho Jiva, Bangkok. She is still alive. Bangkok. Naomi's hands trembled slightly as she stared at the postcard. 3 years of silence, and now this. She quickly locked everything back in her locker and left the break room, her mind racing with possibilities and fears she'd tried to bury. The next morning, Christopher arrived at his office earlier than usual, his encounter with Naomi still occupying his thoughts. He called his assistant, Evelyn Mitchell, into his office as soon as she arrived. Evelyn, I need you to pull the personnel file for one of our night custodial staff. Naomi Brooks. Evelyn, a sharp woman in her early 40s who prided herself on knowing every detail of the hotel's operations, raised an eyebrow. The cleaning lady? Is there a problem? No problem. I'm considering her for a different position. Just get me her file. An hour later, Evelyn returned with a thin manila folder. This is odd, Mr. Langston. Her file is unusually sparse. Basics, contact information, emergency contact and employment start date from 5 years ago. No previous employment history, no educational background, no references. Christopher flipped through the meager paperwork. How is that possible? Don't we require background checks? We do, but it looks like she was hired during that staffing shortage we had in 2020. Maybe the protocols were relaxed. Evelyn studied his face. May I ask why you're suddenly interested in a janitor? She helped a guest last night, spoke multiple languages fluently. I'm thinking she might be useful in guest services. Evelyn's expression grew skeptical. Mr. Langston, with respect, we have trained multilingual staff in guest services. I'm not sure promoting cleaning staff sets the right precedent. Christopher closed the file, noting Evelyn's tone. Thank you. That will be all. Over the next few days, Christopher found reasons to be in areas where Naomi worked during her shift. He told himself it was simple curiosity about an underutilized employee, but truthfully, he was fascinated by the mystery she represented. On Wednesday evening, he encountered her cleaning the conference room where his morning meeting with a German pharmaceutical company would take place. Guten Abend, Naomi, he said, testing whether her German fluency was as impressive as he remembered. Guten Abend, Herr Langston, she replied without looking up from polishing the conference table. Wie geht es Ihnen heute? Gut, danke. I have a meeting here tomorrow with some German executives. Any advice on cultural considerations? Naomi paused in her cleaning. Germans value punctuality and directness. They'll appreciate if you get straight to business without too much small talk. Also, they might expect a more formal presentation style than American companies typically use. Christopher was struck by her insight. You seem to know a lot about German business culture. I pay attention, she said simply, returning to her work. Naomi, can I ask you something? Why do you work the night shift? You clearly have skills that could be better utilized in other positions. She straightened up, her expression becoming guarded again. "I like the quiet, and I'm good at what I do. But surely you must want something more. Your linguistic abilities are remarkable." "Mr. Langston, I appreciate your interest, but I'm content with my current position. I prefer to keep my work and personal life separate." Christopher sensed the conversation was over, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was so much more to discover about this woman. The following evening, Naomi was in the lobby when she noticed Jorge struggling with some paperwork at the concierge desk. She approached him quietly. "What's troubling you?" Jorge looked up with frustration. "There's this scholarship exam I want to take for community college, but the practice tests are all in formal English, and some of the vocabulary is really difficult." "Show me," Naomi said, settling beside him. For the next hour, she patiently explained complex English grammar concepts, helped him understand idiomatic expressions, and even taught him memory techniques for vocabulary retention. Jorge was amazed at her teaching ability. "Naomi, you should be a professor or something. The way you explain things makes everything so clear." "Teaching is just about understanding how people learn differently," she replied. "You're smart, Jorge. You just need to trust yourself more." From across the lobby, Christopher watched their interaction. He'd come down to check on some late-arriving guests, but found himself observing Naomi's natural teaching ability. There was something about her patience and expertise that spoke to formal training. Meanwhile, Evelyn had begun her own investigation into Naomi. Something about the timing of Christopher's sudden interest bothered her, and the thin personnel file raised red flags. She spent her lunch break searching online for any trace of Naomi Brooks from before her employment at the hotel. What she found was troubling. There was virtually no digital footprint for Naomi Brooks prior to 5 years ago. No social media, no public records, no educational credentials. Either she'd lived completely off the grid, or Naomi Brooks wasn't her real name. Evelyn dug deeper, cross-referencing the photo from Naomi's employee ID with facial recognition searches. The results made her pause. There were several matches to photos of a woman named Dr. Brooks, a linguist who had worked for various international organizations before disappearing 3 years ago. But the woman in those photos looked different, more polished, confident with longer hair and professional attire. Still, the facial structure was remarkably similar. Evelyn saved the information to a private folder, unsure what to do with her discovery. On Friday night, Christopher had arranged for a last-minute meeting with a German diplomat who was staying at the hotel. The man's English was limited, and Christopher's German wasn't sufficient for the complex trade discussions they needed to have. "Evelyn, we need an interpreter. Can you call the language service we usually use?" "I tried, but it's after business hours. The earliest they can send someone is tomorrow morning." Christopher hesitated, then made a decision. "Can you ask Naomi if she's available to help? I'll pay her extra for the service." Evelyn's disapproval was evident. "Mr. Langston, using a janitor as an interpreter for diplomatic discussions seems highly irregular. Just ask her, please." 20 minutes later, Naomi knocked on Christopher's office door. She'd changed from her cleaning uniform into a simple but professional-looking black dress she kept in her locker for emergencies. "You asked to see me?" "Yes. Thank you for coming. I have a guest, Herr Diplomat Klaus Weber, who needs to discuss some trade regulations. My German isn't sufficient for the technical aspects. Would you be willing to interpret?" Naomi considered this carefully. Interpreting would require her to demonstrate skills that went far beyond casual conversation. But Jorge had mentioned that the scholarship application deadline was approaching and the extra money could help with his fees. "I can help," she said finally. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Christopher watched in amazement as Naomi seamlessly translated complex economic and legal terminology between English and German. She didn't just interpret words, she conveyed nuance, cultural context, and even helped clarify points when both parties seemed confused. Herr Weber was so impressed that he asked Naomi about her background. She deflected politely, saying she'd studied German in college. When he invited her to consider working as a professional interpreter, she thanked him but explained she was committed to her current position. After the diplomat left, Christopher turned to Naomi. "That was extraordinary. You handled technical, legal, and economic terminology like a professional interpreter. I'm glad I could help, she said, gathering her things to leave. Naomi, please, I have to ask, what's your real background? That level of interpretation skill requires years of training. She paused at the door. Mr. Langston, I've helped you with what you needed. I'd appreciate it if we could leave it at that. But you're wasting your talents here. With your abilities, you could... Could what? She interrupted, her voice sharp for the first time. Could have a different life. Could be someone else. Some of us don't get to choose who we become, Mr. Langston. Sometimes we just have to be grateful for the life we can safely live. She left before he could respond, leaving Christopher with more questions than ever. That same evening, Naomi was finishing her shift when she noticed commotion in the lobby. A French couple was having a heated argument near the elevator banks, their voices rising as other guests looked on uncomfortably. Without thinking, Naomi approached them. Excusez-moi, she said gently in French. Perhaps I can help mediate whatever seems to be troubling you both. The couple, surprised to be addressed in their native language by a hotel employee, explained their situation. They were divorce attorneys from Lyon, ironically in the middle of their own marital dispute. They'd been arguing about whether to continue their vacation or return home early. Naomi listened patiently to both sides, then guided them to a quiet seating area. For 30 minutes, she helped them communicate their real concerns to each other, pointing out where misunderstandings had occurred and helping them find common ground. You both came here to reconnect, she said finally. Perhaps the question isn't whether to stay or go, but how to use this time to remember why you fell in love in the first place. The couple looked at each other with newfound understanding. They thanked Naomi profusely and headed upstairs together, their argument forgotten. Christopher, who had witnessed the entire interaction from the hotel bar, was struck by Naomi's natural diplomatic abilities. She hadn't just translated language, she'd translated emotion and intent, helping two people understand each other on a deeper level. Later that night, as Naomi prepared to leave work, she found an envelope that had been slipped under the employee break room door. Inside was a photograph of a woman who looked exactly like her, but with different hair and clothing. On the back, someone had written, LB Thailand Operation 2022. With the photo was a torn corner of what appeared to be a classified document, with partial text visible. Linguistic Pattern Analysis for Behavioral Modification. Subject: L. Brooks demonstrated exceptional... Naomi's heart raced as she stared at the image. The woman in the photo was her sister Lena, and this was confirmation that she was connected to some kind of operation in Thailand. But who had sent it, and why now? Jorge found her standing frozen in the break room, the photo trembling in her hands. Naomi? Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. She quickly tried to hide the photo, but Jorge had already seen it. That woman looks exactly like you. Who is she? Naomi sat down heavily in one of the plastic chairs, suddenly feeling the weight of 3 years of secrecy. She's my sister. Her name is Lena, and she's been missing for 3 years. Jorge sat beside her. Missing? Like, kidnapped? I don't know. She was working for the United Nations as a linguist. One day she just disappeared. No trace, no explanation. I've been looking for her ever since. Is that why you're working here? You're hiding? Naomi nodded slowly. I used to work for international organizations too. After Lena disappeared, I tried to find out what happened to her, but asking questions made me a target, so I disappeared. Too changed my name, took jobs where no one would look for someone with my background. Jorge studied her face. But someone found you anyway. That's what this photo means, isn't it? I think so. And I think they want me to know they have her. What are you going to do? Naomi looked at the photo again, then at Jorge's concerned face. I don't know. For 3 years, I've been invisible, safe. But if there's a chance Lena is alive, you'll do whatever it takes to find her, Jorge finished, even if it means risking everything I've built here. The next day, Christopher called Naomi to his office. When she arrived, he gestured to a chair across from his desk. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday and I realize I may have been pushy about your background. That wasn't appropriate. Thank you for understanding. However, I do have a proposal. We're hosting a cultural gala next week for international investors. I'd like to offer you a temporary position as a cultural liaison and interpreter for the event. The pay would be substantial, and it would be a one-time engagement if you prefer. Naomi considered this. The extra money could help Jorge with his scholarship, and it might also provide an opportunity to learn more about the international business community that had once been part of her world. What would be required? Greeting international guests, helping with any language barriers, ensuring they feel welcome and understood. Nothing too formal, but it would require you to interact with some very influential people. I'll do it, she said, surprising herself with the quick decision. Christopher smiled. Excellent. Evelyn will coordinate the details with you. As Naomi left his office, she wondered if she was making a mistake. Re-entering the world of international business, even temporarily, felt like stepping back into dangerous territory. But the photo of Lena had changed everything. If someone was sending her messages about her sister, they might be connected to the kind of people who would attend a high-profile international event. That evening, as she prepared for another night of cleaning, Naomi reflected on how much her carefully constructed invisible life was beginning to unravel. Christopher's curiosity, Evelyn's suspicion, and now mysterious messages about Lena. All of it pointed to the same conclusion. Her past was catching up with her, whether she was ready or not. The Langston Grand Hotel's ballroom had been transformed into an elegant showcase of international culture. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over displays representing different countries, while servers circulated with cuisine from around the world. Christopher stood near the entrance, greeting arriving guests in his tailored black tuxedo, but his attention kept drifting toward the staff entrance where Naomi would soon appear. She emerged from the service corridor, wearing a navy blue dress that Jorge had helped her select from a nearby department store. Her hair was pulled back professionally, and she carried herself with a confidence that seemed different from her usual reserved demeanor. Christopher noticed immediately how the change in attire seemed to reveal a more polished version of the woman he'd been trying to understand. "You clean up well," Jorge whispered as he passed by with a tray of champagne glasses. He was working extra shifts to earn money for his scholarship application fees. "Thank you," Naomi replied quietly. "Remember what we practiced for your interview next week. Confidence, eye contact, and don't forget to mention your volunteer work at the community center." The first test of Naomi's abilities came when a group of Brazilian investors arrived speaking rapid Portuguese about concerns over their flight delay. Without hesitation, Naomi approached them with a warm smile. "Boa noite, bem-vindos ao Hotel Langston," she said smoothly. "Ouvi dizer que tiveram problemas com o voo. Posso ajudá-los com alguma coisa?" The Brazilians looked relieved to hear their native language. They explained their concerns about missing the opening remarks due to their late arrival. Naomi quickly coordinated with the event staff to provide them with printed summaries in Portuguese and ensured they were seated where they could still participate meaningfully in the evening's discussions. Christopher watched this interaction with growing admiration, but he wasn't the only one observing Naomi carefully. Across the room, a distinguished Japanese businessman named Mr. Takeda stood quietly by the window, his sharp eyes following Naomi's every move. When she began speaking in fluent Japanese to a group of Tokyo financiers, his expression shifted, from curiosity to something approaching recognition. As the evening progressed, Naomi found herself moving seamlessly between groups, translating technical discussions about international trade regulations, cultural nuances in business practices, and even helping resolve a misunderstanding between German and Korean investors about contract terminology. "The Korean concept of nunchi doesn't translate directly," she explained to the German delegation in their language. "It's about social awareness and reading situations intuitively. When they pause before answering, they're not being evasive. They're being respectful by considering all implications of their response." The German investors nodded appreciatively, and the subsequent negotiations proceeded much more smoothly. During a brief break in the formal presentations, Mr. Takeda approached Naomi as she was reviewing notes for the next session. "Your linguistic skills are quite impressive," he said in English, though his accent was carefully controlled. "Have we met before? You seem familiar." Naomi's professional smile never wavered, but Christopher noticed a subtle tension in her posture. "I don't believe so, Mr. Takeda. I would remember meeting someone of your stature in international business." "Perhaps," he said, studying her face. "You remind me of someone I once knew. A brilliant linguist who worked on some very important projects, Dr. Lena Brooks. Do you know her?" "I'm afraid not," Naomi replied evenly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to prepare for the next session." As she walked away, Takeda's eyes followed her with an intensity that made Christopher uncomfortable. He made a mental note to ask Naomi about the interaction later. Meanwhile, in her office upstairs, Evelyn was reviewing the video footage she'd secretly recorded of Naomi's performance at the gala. She'd managed to capture several minutes of Naomi's flawless interpretation work, and she was now cross-referencing it with information she'd found online. The facial recognition software had provided more matches to photos of Dr. Brooks, and Evelyn had discovered something troubling. According to a heavily redacted government website, Dr. Brooks had been involved in some kind of investigation 3 years ago. The details were classified, but the little information available suggested it involved linguistic pattern analysis for intelligence applications. Evelyn printed out several photos and documents, creating a file that clearly showed the resemblance between Naomi and the missing Dr. Brooks. She was beginning to suspect that Naomi Brooks might actually be Dr. Brooks, living under an assumed identity. Her investigation was interrupted by a call from a private security firm called Silas Corp. They claimed to be conducting routine background checks for hotel security purposes, but something about their questions seemed oddly specific to Naomi's linguistic abilities and work history. "We're particularly interested in any employees with advanced language skills or international backgrounds," the caller explained. "Has anyone on your staff demonstrated unusual proficiency in multiple languages?" Evelyn hesitated. Her competitive nature and desire for promotion warred with a growing sense that she might be getting involved in something dangerous. Finally, she made a decision that would have far-reaching consequences. "Actually, yes. We have a custodial employee who speaks multiple languages fluently. Her name is Naomi Brooks." Back at the gala, Naomi was helping resolve a complex discussion between investors from 5 different countries when she noticed Christopher watching her with an expression of concern. During the next break, he approached her. "Is everything all right? You seemed tense after speaking with Mr. Takeda." "I'm fine," she said, but her voice lacked its usual steadiness. "Just concentrating on doing a good job." "Naomi, I have to ask, did you know that man before tonight?" She met his eyes directly. "Why would you think that?" "Because you looked like you'd seen a ghost when he mentioned Dr. Lena Brooks." Naomi's carefully constructed composure cracked slightly. "I need some air," she said, heading toward the service exit. Christopher followed her onto the hotel's loading dock, where she stood with her back to him, taking deep breaths of the cool night air. "Who is Dr. Lena Brooks?" he asked gently. For a long moment, Naomi didn't respond. Then, without turning around, she began to speak. "Dr. Lena Brooks was my sister. She was a linguist who worked for the United Nations and various international organizations. 3 years ago, she was working on a project involving language pattern analysis, using linguistic markers to understand cultural and behavioral patterns for diplomatic and intelligence purposes." Christopher moved closer, sensing this was the breakthrough he'd been hoping for. She discovered that the research was being used for something she hadn't agreed to. Instead of helping diplomats communicate more effectively, her work was being used to manipulate and profile people. When she tried to expose what was happening, she disappeared. "And you came looking for her?" Naomi finally turned to face him. "I tried to investigate her disappearance through official channels, but I kept hitting walls. Then I started asking the wrong questions to the wrong people. I realized I was in danger too, so I disappeared. I've been hiding ever since, working jobs where no one would look for someone with my background, hoping to hear something about what happened to Lena. That's why you're working as a janitor. You're not hiding from poverty. You're hiding from people who might want to silence you too. I thought I was safe here. 5 years of invisibility, And then you started asking questions. Her voice held no accusation, just resignation. Christopher felt a surge of protective instinct. I'm sorry. I had no idea I was putting you at risk. You weren't to know. But Mr. Takeda recognizing me tonight, that's not a coincidence. He knew Lena, which means he was connected to her project. What do you want to do? Naomi looked back toward the hotel, where the gala was continuing without them. I want to finish this evening professionally, collect my payment, and then decide whether it's time to disappear again. They returned to the gala, but the rest of the evening felt different. Naomi continued her work flawlessly, but Christopher noticed how she avoided any further interaction with Mr. Takeda. When the event finally ended, she helped coordinate the departure of international guests with her usual efficiency, but there was a finality to her movements that worried him. As the last guests departed, Christopher found Naomi in the staff area, changing back into her regular clothes. Before you make any decisions about leaving, would you be willing to tell me the whole story? I might be able to help. Naomi studied his face, weighing her options. Not here. Too many people around. My office? Tomorrow night, after my shift. If I decide to trust you with this, it will be because I believe you might actually be able to help find Lena. The next evening, Christopher waited in his office as the hotel settled into its quiet night rhythm. When Naomi knocked on his door, at midnight, she carried herself with the weariness of someone who had spent years carrying a heavy burden alone. Thank you for agreeing to hear me out, she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. Before you begin, I want you to know that whatever you tell me stays between us unless you decide otherwise. Naomi nodded, then began the story she'd, never told anyone completely. My real name is Dr. Naomi Brooks. Yes, I'm the sister of Dr. Lena Brooks, but I'm also a linguist in my own right. I have a PhD in applied linguistics from Georgetown, with specializations in psycholinguistics and cross-cultural communication. I spent 8 years working for various international organizations, including the UN, UNESCO, and several government agencies. Christopher listened intently as she described her former life, the prestigious conferences, the groundbreaking research into how language shapes thought and behavior, the gradual realization that her work was being weaponized. The project Lena and I were both involved in was called the Cultural Bridge Initiative. Officially, it was designed to help international peacekeepers and diplomats communicate more effectively with local populations. We developed algorithms that could analyze speech patterns, cultural references, and linguistic choices to predict behavioral responses and emotional states. That sounds like valuable research for diplomacy. It was, initially. But then we discovered that the same technology was being used to manipulate public opinion, influence political outcomes, and profile individuals for surveillance purposes. Lena found evidence that our linguistic analysis tools were being sold to private corporations and foreign governments. Naomi's voice grew tighter as she continued. When Lena tried to report this through official channels, she was told to keep quiet. When she persisted, she was reassigned to a project in Thailand. 2 weeks later, she vanished during what was supposed to be a routine research trip to Bangkok. And you tried to find her? I spent months following paper trails, making inquiries and trying to piece together what had happened. But every lead ended in dead ends or threats. Finally, someone I trusted warned me that I was next on their list, that my knowledge of the project made me a liability. Christopher felt a chill. So you disappeared too. I faked my death in a car accident, changed my identity, and started over. I chose jobs that would keep me invisible, night shifts, minimal background checks, positions where highly educated people don't usually work. I've been Naomi the janitor for 5 years, sending money to help Jorge with his education, and trying not to think about my sister every single day. But you never stopped looking for her. How could I? She's my only family. Every few months I'd do careful internet searches, check missing persons databases, look for any trace of her. Until 3 days ago, I'd found nothing. The postcard you received, Naomi looked surprised. How did you? Jorge mentioned you'd seemed upset about something. I put the pieces together. She pulled the Bangkok postcard from her purse, along with the photograph of Lena. Someone knows I'm here, and they know I'm still looking for her. The message says she's alive in Bangkok, but I don't know if this is a trap or genuine information. Christopher studied the items carefully. The photo looks recent, and if someone wanted to trap you, why give you information that might help you find her? Unless they want me to come looking. Maybe they need both sisters for something. Before Christopher could respond, his phone buzzed with a text message from Evelyn. Need to speak with you urgently about security concerns. Can you come to the lobby? I should check on this, Christopher said. Will you wait here? Naomi nodded, though something about the timing felt wrong to her. Downstairs, Christopher found Evelyn pacing near the front desk with a thick folder in her hands. Mr. Langston, I've discovered something about Naomi Brooks that you need to know immediately. What kind of something? She's not who she claims to be. I've been investigating her background, and I believe she's actually Dr. Lena Brooks, a missing person connected to a government investigation. Christopher's mind raced. Evelyn had the wrong sister, but her investigation could be equally dangerous. What exactly have you found? Evelyn opened the folder, revealing photos, documents, and printouts. Facial recognition matches, timeline correlations, and evidence of identity fraud. I've already reported this to Silas Corp for verification. You did what? Christopher's voice sharpened with alarm. Silas Corp contacted me yesterday asking about employees with linguistic abilities. When I saw this evidence, I realized we might have a fugitive working here. They're sending a team to interview her tomorrow. Christopher felt his stomach drop. Evelyn, you may have just put someone's life in danger. What do you mean? I can't explain now, but you need to call Silas Corp and tell them you made a mistake. Cancel that interview. I can't do that. If she's really Dr. Lena Brooks, there might be a reward. Evelyn, I'm ordering you to make that call, now. But it was too late. Through the lobby windows, Christopher could see two black SUVs pulling up to the hotel entrance. Men in dark suits were getting out, moving with the purposeful efficiency of a practiced team. Mr. Langston, one of them called, as they entered the lobby. We're here about Dr. Lena Brooks. We understand she's currently in the building. Christopher's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. They're here. Get out now. N. He looked toward the elevator, knowing. Naomi was still in his office, possibly trapped. The men were already spreading out, blocking the main exits. I'm sorry, he told the Silas Corp leader. I don't know anyone by that name. Sir, we have reliable information that she's here. This is a matter of national security. We'll need to search the building. Upstairs, Naomi had heard the elevator stop on Christopher's floor and the sound of multiple footsteps in the hallway. Years of living in hiding had given her excellent instincts for danger. She quickly sent the warning text to Christopher, then looked around his office for alternative exits. The office had a window that opened onto the hotel's old fire escape, a relic from the building's earlier incarnation that had been maintained for safety purposes. Naomi grabbed her purse and the evidence about Lena, then climbed onto the fire escape just as she heard voices outside Christopher's office door. Meanwhile, Jorge was finishing his shift in the lobby when he noticed the commotion. The men in suits were questioning hotel staff, and he overheard them asking about the woman who speaks multiple languages. His heart sank as he realized they were looking for Naomi. Thinking quickly, Jorge approached one of the men. Excuse me, are you looking for someone? We're looking for a woman who works here. She might be using the name Naomi Brooks. Oh, you just missed her, Jorge said with practiced innocence. She finished her shift about an hour ago, said something about visiting her cousin in Philadelphia this weekend. The man's expression sharpened. Are you certain? Yeah, I helped her carry some stuff to her car. Old blue Honda, I think. Seemed like she was in a hurry. While Jorge was misdirecting the search team, Naomi made her way down the fire escape, to the alley behind the hotel. She knew her apartment would be compromised soon, if it wasn't already. Everything she'd built over the past 5 years was about to disappear again. She was about to leave the alley when her phone buzzed with another message from the unknown number. Storage Unit 247, Riverside Self-Storage. Key taped under sink in employee break room. Everything you need to know about Thailand. A friend, Naomi hesitated. Another mysterious message. Another potential trap. But the mention of Thailand and the specific location of a key suggested someone with inside knowledge of both her situation and the hotel layout. Making a dangerous decision, she circled back to the hotel's service entrance. The Silas Corp team was still focused on the main areas, giving her a narrow window to reach the employee break room. She found the key exactly where the message indicated, taped under the sink where she'd hidden her own secrets for years. Attached to it was a note. Your sister is alive, but she's not the only one in danger now. The storage unit contains everything we could save from the Thailand operation. Use it wisely. Agent Marcus Webb. Naomi recognized the name. Marcus Webb had been Lena's handler during the Cultural Bridge Initiative, one of the few people in the intelligence community who had tried to protect her sister when things went wrong. As she prepared to leave for the storage facility, Naomi heard the distinct sound of someone being forcibly escorted through the hotel corridors. Through a crack in the break room door, she saw Christopher being led toward the exit by two Silas Corp agents. Her heart clenched. Christopher had tried to help her, and now he was being taken because of her secrets, but there was nothing she could do for him until she understood what was in that storage unit and what Marcus Webb had been trying to tell her. 20 minutes later, at the Riverside self-storage facility, Naomi used the key to open Unit 247. Inside were boxes of documents, recording equipment, and what appeared to be surveillance files. But most importantly, there was a video message addressed to her. She plugged the USB drive into an old laptop that was also in the storage unit. Marcus Webb's face appeared on the screen, looking haggard and worried. Naomi, if you're watching this, it means the situation has escalated beyond our ability to contain it. Your sister is alive, but she's being held at a facility in Thailand as part of an ongoing operation. The same people who took her are now coming for you. The video continued with detailed information about the Thailand facility, security protocols, and a warning that Silas Corp was planning to use both sisters for an expanded version of the linguistic manipulation program. I've included everything I could gather about the facility's location and the people involved. But, Naomi, you need to understand, this isn't just about rescuing Lena anymore. The technology you both helped develop is being used on a massive scale. If you don't stop this, your research will be used to manipulate millions of people. As the video ended, Naomi sat in the dim storage unit, surrounded by evidence of a conspiracy that went far deeper than she'd imagined. Her phone buzzed with another message. Hotel is clear. Where are you? See, Christopher had been released, but for how long? And how much time did she have before Silas Corp realized they'd been misdirected and expanded their search? Naomi made a decision that would change everything. Instead of running again, she would fight back. But first, she needed to get Christopher and Jorge to safety, and then figure out how to mount a rescue mission to Thailand with resources she didn't have, and skills she'd been hiding for 5 years. The message she sent back to Christopher was simple. Safe for now. Meet me at Jorge's apartment tomorrow at 8 p.m. Bring any travel documents you have. We're going to Thailand. Christopher's hands trembled slightly as he decoded the GPS coordinates embedded in Naomi's encrypted message. The sophisticated technique of hiding location data within sound waves spoke to a level of training that went far beyond anything he'd imagined. The coordinates pointed to an isolated compound on a small island 30 kilometers south of Bangkok, accessible only by boat or helicopter. Jorge arrived at his cramped apartment that evening to find Christopher and Naomi hunched over his laptop, studying satellite images and facility blueprints that Marcus Webb had included in the storage unit files. This is insane, Jorge said, setting down groceries he'd picked up to avoid suspicion. You're talking about breaking into what looks like a military compound in a foreign country. It's not military, Naomi corrected, pointing to architectural details on the screen. It's designed to look like a research facility, but the security measures are purely defensive. They're not expecting an assault. They're expecting to keep people in, not out. Christopher had spent the day making arrangements under the pretense of exploring hotel expansion opportunities in Southeast Asia. His business connections had made it relatively easy to secure a private jet and establish a credible cover story for traveling to Bangkok with associates. I still have contacts from my whistleblower days, Jorge offered, surprising them both. Before I came to work at the hotel, I helped expose a labor trafficking ring. Some of the people I worked with are in Thailand now, running legitimate operations, but still connected to underground networks. Naomi looked at Jorge with new respect. You never mentioned that background. You never mentioned being a UN linguist, he replied with a slight smile. We all have our secrets. Meanwhile, across the city, Evelyn sat in her apartment staring at her phone. She'd received 3 calls from Silas Corp demanding to know why. Their operation at the hotel had failed to locate their target. The final call had been threatening, making it clear that her cooperation was no longer optional. She'd also been researching Silas Corp more thoroughly and discovered connections to several international incidents involving missing persons and corporate espionage. The realization that she'd potentially delivered Naomi to dangerous people was keeping her awake at night. When her phone rang again, she was surprised to see Christopher's number. Evelyn, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Mr. Langston, I'm sorry about yesterday. I think I made a terrible mistake. Are you being pressured by Silas Corp to continue helping them find Naomi? Evelyn's silence was answer enough. Listen carefully, Christopher continued. They're not law enforcement, and Naomi isn't a criminal. You've gotten involved in something much more serious than you realized. Can you stall them for 48 hours? I don't know how. Tell them you think she might have fled to Canada. You found evidence of a fake passport with a Toronto address. Can you do that? Yes, but Christopher, what's really going on? I can't explain everything now, but I promise you'll understand soon. Just buy us those 48 hours. The next morning, Christopher, Naomi, and Jorge boarded a private jet bound for Bangkok. Christopher had told his board he was exploring expansion opportunities, while Naomi and Jorge traveled on hastily obtained business visas as his cultural consultants. During the 14-hour flight, Naomi studied every piece of intelligence Marcus Webb had gathered about the facility. The compound housed approximately 30 personnel, including researchers, security staff, and what appeared to be several other prisoners beyond Lena. According to these files, they're using the facility to test large-scale applications of the linguistic manipulation technology, Naomi explained to Christopher and Jorge. They take people with specific language skills and use them to refine algorithms that can influence behavior through targeted audio and text. Your sister is being used as a test subject? Christopher asked. Worse, she's being forced to help perfect the technology. The psychological profile suggests they've convinced her that cooperation is the only way to protect me. Jorge leaned forward. So they've been using each of you to control the other. Exactly. And now that they know I'm alive and active, they'll probably tell her that my safety depends on her continued cooperation. When they landed in Bangkok, they were met by Somchai Pattinson, Jorge's contact from his whistleblower days. Somchai was a wiry man in his 50s who ran a legitimate import-export business while maintaining connections to various human rights organizations. Jorge told me you need to reach someone being held against their will, Somchai said as they drove through Bangkok's crowded streets. But what he described sounds like the kind of operation that has government protection. Naomi shared enough of their story to explain the stakes without revealing sensitive details about the linguistic technology. Somchai listened carefully, his expression growing more serious. I know the island you're talking about. Local fishermen avoid it because boats that get too close are turned away by patrol craft. But there are rumors about the people held there. What kind of rumors? That they're all highly educated foreigners, scientists, linguists, computer programmers, people who disappeared from other countries and ended up there. Christopher felt a chill. How many people are we talking about? Maybe 20 or 30. But here's what you need to understand. This isn't just about rescuing your sister. If this place is what I think it is, breaking in could expose something much bigger. That evening, they met with Somchai's network of contacts in a small restaurant near the Chao Phraya River. The group included a former government official who had been fighting corruption, a journalist who specialized in investigating human trafficking, and a boat captain named Crit, who knew the waters around the facility. The compound has 3 main buildings, Crit explained, sketching a rough map on a napkin. Security patrols the perimeter every 2 hours. The only time there's Minimal coverage is during the shift change at 3 a.m. How do we get there without being detected? Jorge asked. Fishing boat. I can get you within swimming distance, but you'll need to handle everything from there. Naomi studied the sketched layout, her mind working through possibilities. Marcus, Webb's files mention an old supply tunnel that connects to the main research building. If we can find the entrance on the shoreline, we might be able to get inside without triggering perimeter alarms. And once you're inside? Somchai asked. I locate Lena, gather evidence of what they're doing to the other prisoners, and get everyone out if possible. Christopher shook his head. That's too much for one person. We need a better plan. No, Naomi said firmly. This is what I'm trained for. Linguistic intelligence work included infiltration and extraction techniques. But I need you and Jorge to be ready to create a distraction if things go wrong. Later that night, in their hotel room, Naomi began preparing for the mission. She changed into dark clothing and organized the equipment Somchai had provided: waterproof communications gear, basic tools for bypassing electronic locks, and a small recording device to document whatever they found. Naomi, Christopher said as she checked her equipment one final time, I want you to know that whatever happens tomorrow, meeting you has changed my perspective on everything. You've shown me that people are capable of sacrificing everything for the ones they love. She looked up at him, touched by his words. Christopher, if something goes wrong tomorrow, make sure the world knows what Silas Corp is doing. Don't let them use this technology to control people. Nothing's going wrong, Jorge said firmly. We're bringing your sister home. At 2 a.m., Crit's fishing boat cut through the dark waters toward the compound. The island appeared as a cluster of lights in the distance, barely visible against the star-filled sky. As they approached, Naomi could make out the outline of buildings and the sweep of searchlights along the shoreline. This is as close as I can get without triggering their sensors, Crit whispered. The supply tunnel entrance should be about 50 meters to the right of that pier. Naomi slipped into the warm water, her equipment secured in a waterproof pack. The swim to shore took 15 minutes, during which she had to avoid 2 patrol boats and time her approach to coincide with a gap in the searchlight pattern. She found the tunnel entrance exactly where Marcus Webb's intelligence had indicated. A partially concealed opening in the rocky shoreline that appeared to be used for underwater supply deliveries. The tunnel was narrow and dark, but it led directly into the basement of the main research building. Inside the facility, Naomi moved carefully through corridors that hummed with the sound of electronic equipment. Following the building schematics she'd memorized, she made her way toward the detention wing where prisoners were reportedly held. The first shock came when she accessed the facility's internal monitoring system using techniques Marcus Webb had taught her years ago. The screen showed not just detention cells, but active research sessions where prisoners were being subjected to various forms of linguistic conditioning. In one room, she watched a woman speaking into recording equipment while researchers monitored her stress levels and brain activity. In another, a man was listening to audio tracks while his responses were carefully documented. And then she found Lena. Her sister was in a sterile room that looked more like a laboratory than a cell, speaking into sophisticated recording equipment. But something was wrong. Lena's movements seemed mechanical, her responses too controlled. Naomi hacked into the room's communication system and spoke softly in the private language they'd created as children, their mixture of Spanish, French, and Swahili that no one else understood. Lena, it's me. I'm here to take you home. On the monitor, she watched her sister's head snap up, confusion crossing her face. For a moment, Lena looked directly at the camera as if she could see Naomi. Naomi? Lena whispered in their childhood. Language. Are you real, or is this another test? I'm real, sister. I'm coming to get you. But as Naomi moved toward Lena's location, she realized her infiltration had triggered silent alarms. Through the facility's security system, she could see guards converging on her position. Naomi's years of intelligence training kicked in as she assessed her rapidly deteriorating situation. The guards were moving systematically through the building, but they didn't yet know her exact location. She had perhaps 5 minutes before they reached the detention wing. Using her access to the facility systems, she triggered what appeared to be a security breach in the communications array. Alarms began blaring throughout the compound, but instead of bringing more security to her location, it drew guards away from the detention areas toward the communication center. She reached Lena's room and found the electronic lock system more sophisticated than expected, but the same linguistic pattern recognition that made her valuable as a prisoner also made her excellent at decoding security protocols. The system responded to voice commands in multiple languages, and Naomi quickly identified the layered authentication pattern. "Authorized personnel," she said in Mandarin, followed by a technical phrase in German, then a security code in Russian. The lock disengaged with a soft click. Lena looked up as the door opened, and for a moment, neither sister spoke. 3 years of separation and trauma had changed them both, but the recognition was instant and profound. "Naomi," Lena whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I thought they had killed you." "I'm here now," Naomi said, embracing her sister carefully. Lena felt fragile, and her responses seemed delayed, as if she was struggling to process reality. "Lena, we need to leave. Can you walk?" They've been giving me medications to help me focus on the work. My mind feels cloudy." Naomi quickly examined the medical chart attached to Lena's equipment. Her sister had been subjected to a combination of psychological conditioning and pharmaceutical intervention designed to make her compliant and productive. "Listen to me," Naomi said in their childhood language. "Remember when we built that fort in the backyard? You said we were explorers who could go anywhere if we stuck together. We're going to explore our way out of here." The familiar memory seemed to penetrate Lena's mental fog. She stood more steadily, her eyes becoming clearer. "There are others," Lena said, "in the cells down the hall. Scientists, linguists, programmers. They're using all of us to perfect the system." Naomi made a decision that went against every survival instinct. "Show me." They moved quickly through the detention wing, where Naomi discovered 12 other prisoners, all being held in similar conditions. The men and women were from various countries, all with advanced degrees in linguistics, computer science, or cognitive psychology. "We can't save everyone," Lena said pragmatically. "The security response will be too strong." "Yes, we can," Naomi replied, accessing the detention system's central controls. "But we need to move fast." Meanwhile, outside the facility, Christopher and Jorge waited anxiously on Crit's boat. They'd been monitoring radio chatter and could hear increased security activity on the island. "Something's gone wrong," Jorge said, watching searchlights sweep the water more frantically than before. Christopher's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Hotel security compromised. Evelyn captured. They know your location. Emergency contact." "We need to warn Naomi," Christopher said, but their communication with the facility had been cut off when she triggered the security distraction. Back inside the compound, Naomi had managed to unlock most of the detention cells, but the rescued prisoners were in various states of psychological and physical disrepair. Some could barely walk, while others seemed confused about whether their rescue was real. "Listen to me, everyone," Naomi called out in English, then repeated in several other languages. "I'm Dr. Naomi Brooks. I'm here to get you out. But I need you to follow my instructions exactly." She led the group toward the supply tunnel, but as they reached the basement level, they encountered the facility's chief of security, a man named Coleman, who had been hunting for the intruder. "Dr. Brooks," Coleman said calmly, his weapon trained on the group. "You've caused quite a disruption tonight." "Let these people go," Naomi said. "They're not criminals. They're victims. They're valuable assets in a program that's bigger than you understand. As are you." Lena stepped forward, her mind finally clear enough to be angry. "Assets? You've destroyed our lives, separated us from our families, forced us to create weapons disguised as research." "You've created something revolutionary," Coleman replied. "Technology that can prevent wars by managing public opinion, stop terrorism by identifying threats through speech patterns, create stability through controlled information flow." "You mean control people by manipulating how they think and feel," Naomi said. "Turn language itself into a weapon." "Language has always been a weapon. We've simply made it more precise." The standoff was broken by an explosion that shook the entire building. Through the windows, they could see that Somchai's network had launched their own assault on the compound's power grid, creating chaos throughout the facility. In the confusion, Lena grabbed a fire extinguisher and sprayed it at Coleman, temporarily blinding him. Naomi used the distraction to guide the rescued prisoners toward the tunnel entrance. "Go, go, go!" she shouted, pushing people toward the water. The tunnel was narrow, and getting 12 weakened prisoners through it would be challenging, but the alternative was impossible. As the last of the prisoners entered the tunnel, Naomi heard Coleman calling for backup over his radio. She realized that even if they escaped the island, Silas Corp would never stop hunting them. "Lena," she said, pulling her sister aside, "I need you to take the others and get to the boat. There's something I have to do first." "I'm not leaving you again." "You have to. These people need medical attention, and Christopher and Jorge are waiting to help everyone get to safety." Lena studied her sister's face. "What are you planning?" "I'm going to download everything from their research servers. All the data about the linguistic manipulation program, the names of everyone involved, the locations of other facilities. If we don't expose this completely, they'll just rebuild somewhere else. That's suicide. The building is crawling with security. Maybe, but it's the only way to make sure this technology can't be used to control people." They were interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Through the facility's communication system, they could hear Coleman coordinating a building-wide search. "The main server room is on the 3rd floor, Lena said quickly. "Access code is Babel 779. But Naomi, once you start that download, you'll have maybe 10 minutes before they cut all power to the building." "That's enough time." Lena hugged her sister fiercely. "If you don't make it out, I'll make it out. We're explorers, remember? We always find a way home." As Lena led the rescued prisoners into the tunnel, Naomi made her way toward the server room. She could hear security teams systematically searching each floor, but the ongoing power problems were keeping them disorganized. The server room was a massive space, filled with humming computers and data storage systems. Naomi quickly located the main research database and began the download process, copying terabytes of information onto encrypted drives that Marcus Webb had provided. But as the download progressed, she heard something that made her blood run cold. Over the facility's intercom system, Coleman was speaking to someone via satellite phone. "Yes, sir. Dr. Naomi Brooks is in the building. We have her trapped on the 3rd floor." "Understood. Initiate the Babylon Protocol immediately." Naomi didn't know what the Babylon Protocol was, but the tone of Coleman's voice suggested it was a final option that would ensure no one left the island alive. Through the server room windows, she could see boats approaching the island from multiple directions. Not rescue boats, but military-style vessels carrying what appeared to be a much larger security force. The download completion indicator showed 8 minutes remaining, but Naomi was beginning to realize she might not have that much time. In the distance, she could hear the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors approaching. Her phone buzzed with a message from Christopher. "Whatever you're doing, you need to finish it now. The entire island is about to be overrun." Naomi looked at the progress bar showing 60% complete and made a decision that would determine not just her fate, but the fate of everyone who had been imprisoned in this facility and everyone who might be imprisoned in the future. She began a second process, not just copying the data, but broadcasting it directly to every contact in Marcus Webb's encrypted network. If she couldn't escape with the information, she would make sure it reached people who could use it. The broadcast began just as the first helicopter landed on the facility's roof. Through the server room's security monitors, Naomi could see heavily armed tactical teams entering the building. Outside in the water, Christopher watched the approaching vessels with growing horror. "Crit, we need to get out of here now." "What about Naomi?" Jorge demanded. "She told us to make sure the evidence gets out. If we're captured, no one will know what happened here." Reluctantly, Jorge helped guide the rescued prisoners into Crit's boat as searchlights began sweeping the water around them. Lena was the last aboard, her eyes fixed on the facility where her sister remained trapped. "She's going to make it," Jorge said, though his voice lacked conviction. Back in the server room, Naomi watched her upload progress reach 90% just as the first tactical team reached her floor. She could hear them moving methodically through rooms, getting closer to her location. The upload finished with minutes to spare, but as Naomi prepared to escape through a service vent, she realized the room's door had been sealed electronically. Coleman's voice came through the intercom one final time. "Dr. Brooks, your upload has been detected and blocked. Nothing you've done tonight will matter. The program will continue, with or without you and your sister." But Coleman was wrong. Naomi's years of working with intelligence networks had taught her to plan for exactly this scenario. The upload hadn't gone to just one location. It had been distributed to dozens of secure servers around the world, including news organizations, government oversight committees, and human rights groups. As security forces prepared to breach the server room, Naomi spoke into her communication device, knowing that Christopher and the others were listening. "The upload is complete. Everything about the linguistic manipulation program is now in the hands of people who can stop it. Tell the world what they've been doing here." The last thing she transmitted was a coded message in 9 different languages, each containing coordinates to other Silas Corp facilities around the world. The door exploded inward, just as Naomi finished speaking. 3 weeks after the Thailand operation, Christopher's private estate in the Hamptons had been transformed into an unlikely safe house. The rescued prisoners were recovering in the guest quarters, while Naomi worked around the clock to decrypt and organize the massive data dump she'd transmitted from the facility. Against all odds, she had escaped through the server room's emergency ventilation system just moments before the tactical team breached the door. Lena sat beside her sister in the estate's library, both women surrounded by laptops, encrypted drives, and printed documents that revealed the staggering scope of Silas Corp's operations. The pharmaceutical conditioning was gradually leaving Lena's system, and her natural brilliance was reasserting itself. "The linguistic manipulation program is operating in 47 countries, Lena said, reviewing a classified spreadsheet. "They're not just targeting individuals anymore, Naomi. They're influencing entire populations through embedded audio and social media, streaming services, even emergency broadcast systems." Naomi rubbed her tired eyes. "Look at this," she said, pointing to another document. "They've been selling customized manipulation packages to corporations, political campaigns, and foreign governments. A company can literally purchase the ability to make their products seem more appealing through subliminal linguistic triggers." Jorge entered the library carrying a tray of coffee and sandwiches. His scholarship interview had been postponed due to the crisis, but he'd thrown himself into helping organize the evidence with the dedication of someone who understood the stakes. "Christopher's on a conference call with his legal team," Jorge reported. "They think we have enough evidence to bring down Silas Corp completely, but there's a problem." "What kind of problem?" Naomi asked. "The same people who were using this technology are now trying to discredit us. They're claiming we're terrorists who attacked a legitimate research facility." Before anyone could respond, Evelyn's voice came from the doorway. "That's because half the government officials who should be investigating this are on Silas Corp's payroll." Everyone turned to see Evelyn standing in the entrance, looking exhausted but determined. Christopher had arranged for her release from Silas Corp custody through his legal connections, but she'd spent several days in detention being questioned about her role in the hotel incident. "Evelyn," Naomi said carefully, "I want you to know that I don't hold you responsible for what happened. You were manipulated too. Thank you for saying that, but I need to take responsibility for my actions." Evelyn moved into the room, accepting a cup of coffee from Jorge. "During my debriefing with Silas Corp, I learned something important. They're planning to activate what they call Protocol 7, a large-scale deployment of the manipulation technology during next week's Global Economic Summit." Christopher appeared in the doorway, his phone still pressed to his ear. "Hold on," he said to whoever he was speaking with, then covered the phone. "Protocol 7? What does that involve?" "World leaders, business executives, and financial ministers from 90 countries will be in one location," Evelyn explained. "Silas Corp plans to use the summit's simultaneous translation system to influence major economic and political decisions through embedded linguistic programming." Lena looked up from her computer. "They could literally reshape global policy by making certain ideas seem more logical or appealing to the summit participants." We have to stop it, Naomi said simply. Christopher finished his phone call and joined the group. I've been speaking with Senator Patricia Williams, who chairs the Senate Intelligence Committee. She's agreed to arrange a closed hearing for us to present our evidence, but it won't happen until after the summit. That's too late, Jorge said. If they succeed with Protocol 7, they'll have demonstrated that the technology works on a global scale. Even if we expose them afterward, the damage will be done. Naomi stood up, her mind working through possibilities. Then we don't wait for official channels. We go public ourselves. How? Christopher asked. Silas Corp controls significant media, resources, and they're already working to discredit us. We use their own technology against them, Naomi said, a plan forming in her mind. Jorge, remember when you helped that activist group broadcast unauthorized content through satellite feeds? Jorge's eyes lit up with understanding. You want to hack into the summit's translation system. Not hack. Replace. If we can substitute our own linguistic programming for theirs, we can use the same channels they plan to use. But instead of manipulation, we'll broadcast truth. Evelyn leaned forward. That's incredibly dangerous. If you're caught interfering with an international summit. If we don't interfere, world leaders will make decisions based on artificial influence, Lena pointed out. That's even more dangerous. Christopher was quiet for a moment, weighing the risks. Finally, he spoke. What would you need to make this work? Access to satellite communication equipment, someone who understands the summit's technical infrastructure, and about 72 hours to prepare the counter-programming. I can provide the equipment and technical access through Langston Corp's communications division, Christopher said. But this means putting my entire company at risk. Christopher, Naomi said gently, I won't ask you to do that. You've already done more than enough. No, he replied firmly. You've shown me that some things are more important than corporate profits or personal safety. If this technology isn't stopped, it will change the fundamental nature of human communication and free will. Over the next 3 days, the group worked with desperate intensity. Naomi and Lena created linguistic counter-programming designed to neutralize Silas Corp's manipulation techniques while simultaneously revealing their existence to the summit participants. Jorge coordinated with his activist network to establish secure communication channels, while Evelyn used her corporate connections to gather intelligence about the summit's security protocols. Christopher faced the most difficult challenge. His board of directors had caught wind of his involvement in what they perceived as anti-corporate activism, and several major shareholders were demanding his removal as CEO. The board meeting is tomorrow, he told Naomi during one of their planning sessions. They're going to vote me out. I'm sorry, Naomi said. This is my fault. No, it's not. This is the first time in my life I've used my resources for something that actually matters. Whatever happens with the company, I don't regret it. The morning of the Global Economic Summit, Naomi sat in a makeshift command center that Christopher had established in his estate's communications room. Multiple screens showed feeds from the summit location in Geneva, while sophisticated equipment allowed them to monitor and potentially override the translation system. Silas Corp's programming starts broadcasting in 6 hours, Lena reported, monitoring intercepted communications. They're using a cascading activation system. The manipulation effects will build gradually throughout the day, becoming strongest during the final policy discussions. Are we ready? Christopher asked. Naomi looked around at her unlikely team. A CEO who had risked everything, a janitor turned whistleblower studying for his college entrance exams, a corporate assistant seeking redemption, and her sister whom she'd thought lost forever. Jorge, you're monitoring Silas Corp's security frequencies. Let us know the moment they detect our intervention. Evelyn, you're coordinating with Senator Williams' staff to ensure our evidence reaches the right people as soon as we go public. Lena, you're managing the technical aspects of the counter-programming. Make sure our message gets through clearly. Christopher, you're our connection to legitimate media outlets. Once we prove the manipulation is happening, we need responsible journalists to tell the story. At 2 p.m. Geneva time, Naomi initiated their counter-operation. Instead of Silas Corp's subtle manipulation, the summit's translation system began broadcasting a different kind of message. In dozens of languages, summit participants heard carefully crafted phrases that exposed the existence of linguistic manipulation while encouraging critical thinking and awareness. Ladies and gentlemen, Naomi's voice came through the translation. System in perfect diplomatic Chinese, you are currently being subjected to linguistic programming designed to influence your decisions. This message is being broadcast to protect your freedom of thought. She repeated the warning in French, Arabic, Spanish, German, Russian, Japanese, and English, while Lena simultaneously broadcast supporting evidence through data channels connected to the summit's digital systems. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Summit participants began removing their translation earpieces, demanding explanations from technical staff, and questioning whether their previous discussions had been influenced by outside forces. They're trying to shut us down, Jorge reported, monitoring Silas Corp's emergency frequencies. Multiple teams converging on our location. How long do we need? Christopher asked. 10 more minutes to complete the evidence broadcast, Naomi replied, her fingers flying over the controls. But Silas Corp's response was faster than expected. Through the estate's security cameras, they could see black vehicles surrounding the property. They're jamming our satellite uplink, Lena called out, signal strength dropping rapidly. Naomi made a split-second decision that would define the rest of her life. She activated a backup system that Jorge had helped her prepare, a distributed network that could continue broadcasting even if their primary location was compromised. Everyone needs to go, she said, not looking up from her controls. Christopher, there's a helicopter landing pad behind the main house. Jorge has the coordinates for a secondary safe house. What about you? Lena demanded. Someone needs to maintain the broadcast until the evidence transfer is complete. Go. But before anyone could argue, Evelyn spoke up. No. This is my responsibility too. She sat down at a secondary control station. I helped create this mess. I'm going to help finish it. Christopher hesitated, torn between his protective instincts and the recognition that Naomi was making the only choice that could ensure their mission succeeded. Go, Naomi said again, finally looking at him. Make sure the world understands what we've exposed here today. As Christopher, Jorge, and Lena reluctantly evacuated, Naomi and Evelyn continued broadcasting evidence of the linguistic manipulation program to news organizations, government agencies, and human rights groups around the world. Broadcast complete, Evelyn announced just as Silas Corp operatives breached the estate's perimeter. Then let's go finish this properly, Naomi said, activating one final protocol, a dead man switch that would release additional evidence if they were captured or killed. 6 months later, Christopher Langston walked through the renovated lobby of the Langston Grand Hotel, which had been transformed into something he barely recognized. Where once there had been simple elegance, now there were displays celebrating linguistic diversity and cultural communication. The hotel had become the headquarters of the Langston Institute for Linguistic Ethics, with Naomi Brooks serving as its director. The Global Economic Summit incident had exposed Silas Corp's operations on an unprecedented scale. International investigations had shut down manipulation programs in dozens of countries, leading to new legislation protecting cognitive liberty and linguistic autonomy. The company itself had been dismantled, with its executives facing criminal charges in multiple jurisdictions. Naomi emerged from the elevator wearing a professional suit that reflected her new role. But Christopher noticed she still moved with the quiet efficiency he'd first observed when she was cleaning these same floors. How are the new students adapting? He asked, referring to the first class of the Institute's fellowship program. Better than expected, Naomi replied. We have linguists, computer scientists, and ethicists from 30 countries working together to develop safeguards against linguistic manipulation. It's exactly the kind of collaborative research Lena and I always hoped to be part of. They walked together toward the conference room, where Naomi was scheduled to address a gathering of international delegates. The room was packed with representatives from governments, universities, and human rights organizations, all seeking to understand and prevent the misuse of linguistic technology. Dr. Brooks, one delegate called out as they entered, can you explain how ordinary citizens can protect themselves from the kind of manipulation your research exposed? Naomi moved to the podium with the same calm confidence she'd once brought to comforting confused hotel guests. "The first defense is awareness," she began, her voice carrying easily through the room. "When people understand that language can be weaponized, they become naturally more critical of the information they receive." She continued her presentation in multiple languages, seamlessly switching between English, French, Spanish, and Mandarin as she addressed different delegation groups directly. Christopher watched from the back of the room, still amazed by her abilities even after all this time. "The second defense is education. We're developing programs to teach people how to recognize linguistic manipulation techniques. Just as we teach children to be cautious of strangers, we need to teach them to be cautious of language that tries to bypass their critical thinking." After the presentation, Christopher found Naomi in her office, the same space that had once been his executive suite. The room was now filled with books, research papers, and communications equipment that connected the Institute to linguistic researchers around the world. "Any word from Jorge?" he asked. Naomi smiled. "He started his sophomore year at Georgetown last week, double major in linguistics and computer science. He wants to specialize in ethical AI development. And Lena? She's in Geneva, testifying before the UN Human Rights Council about establishing international protocols for cognitive liberty. It's the work she always wanted to do, but now she's doing it in the open instead of in secret." Christopher settled into a chair across from her desk. "Do you ever miss the simplicity of your old life, when your biggest concern was whether the evacuation signs were properly translated?" Naomi considered the question seriously. "I miss the safety of invisibility sometimes, but I don't miss the helplessness. When I was hiding, I couldn't protect anyone. Not Lena, not the other victims, not the millions of people who were being manipulated without their knowledge. And now I can use my abilities to build something positive instead of just hiding from something negative." Their conversation was interrupted by Evelyn, who knocked on the office door. She'd been appointed as the Institute's ethics director, a role that allowed her to apply her corporate experience to ensuring the organization remained accountable to its mission. "Naomi, we've received another letter from someone who thinks they've been a victim of linguistic manipulation," Evelyn said, carrying a thick folder. "A journalist in Myanmar who believes her articles were being altered through translation software to promote specific political viewpoints." "Set up a secure communication channel," Naomi replied immediately. "If her suspicions are correct, she might be in danger." As Evelyn left to make the arrangements, Christopher reflected on how much had changed since that night when he'd first heard Naomi speaking 9 languages to a frightened child. "You know, when I first saw you helping guests in different languages, I thought I was discovering hidden talent that was being wasted. I never imagined I was meeting someone who would change everything I understood about communication and power." "You gave me the chance to stop hiding," Naomi said. "Without your curiosity and willingness to take risks, Lena would still be imprisoned, and the manipulation program would still be operating. What's next for the Institute?" Naomi gestured toward a world map on her wall, marked with pins indicating locations where linguistic manipulation had been detected. "We're opening regional centers in 5 continents. Each one will focus on the specific linguistic and cultural challenges of their region, while contributing to our global understanding of how language shapes thought." Christopher noticed a new pin on the map, in a location that made him concerned. "Is that Bangkok?" "We've received reports of a new facility operating there. Not connected to Silas Corp, but using similar techniques. It seems that exposing one organization has inspired others to try to replicate their work. So the fight isn't over." "It may never be completely over," Naomi acknowledged. "But now the world knows what to watch for, and there are people dedicated to preventing this technology from being misused." She moved to the window that overlooked the hotel's main entrance, where a small plaque had been installed. Christopher joined her, reading the inscription, "In memory of Dr. Marcus Webb and all those who sacrificed their safety to protect human freedom of thought." "He would be proud of what you've built here," Christopher said. "I hope so. But Marcus always said that the real victory isn't stopping one threat. It's creating systems that can recognize and respond to new threats as they emerge. As evening approached, Naomi prepared to begin her old routine of walking through the hotel, but now her purpose was different. Instead of cleaning floors and emptying trash cans, she was checking on the security of the Institute's research and ensuring that the former hotel rooms, now converted to offices and laboratories, were properly secured for the night. Jorge called. As she was making her rounds, his voice excited with the energy of a college student discovering new possibilities. "Naomi, you should see the research project I'm working on," he said. "We're developing an app that can detect manipulation techniques in real time and alert users when they're being targeted." "That sounds promising. How does it work?" "It analyzes the linguistic patterns in text and audio, looking for the kind of embedded triggers you taught us to recognize. When it detects something suspicious, it flags the content and explains what technique is being used." "Be careful with that technology, Jorge. The same tools that can protect people can also be used to harm them if they fall into the wrong hands." "I know. That's why I'm building in safeguards from the beginning. No one should have the power to control how other people think." After the call ended, Naomi continued her evening walk through the institute. In what had once been the hotel's guest rooms, researchers from around the world were working to understand and protect the fundamental human right to think freely. She paused at the memorial display in the main lobby, where photos of Marcus Webb and other whistleblowers who had sacrificed their lives to expose linguistic manipulation were displayed alongside quotes about the importance of cognitive liberty. Her own photo was there too, but not the professional headshot from her UN days. Instead, it was a picture Jorge had taken of her teaching a group of refugees how to recognize manipulation techniques in their native languages. She was wearing simple clothes, her hands gesturing as she explained complex concepts with the patience and clarity that had once made her an effective night janitor. The inscription under her photo read, "Dr. Naomi Brooks, the woman who cleaned floors and cleared the fog." As she prepared to leave for the evening, Naomi reflected on the journey that had brought her from hiding in plain sight to leading a global movement for linguistic freedom. The path had been dangerous and costly, but it had also revealed something she'd never expected to find, that her greatest strength wasn't her ability to speak 9 languages, but her willingness to use those abilities to protect others. Her phone buzzed with a message from Lena. "UN vote unanimous. Cognitive Liberty Protocol passes. International law now protects freedom of thought from linguistic manipulation." "We did it, sister." Naomi smiled, remembering their childhood fort in the backyard, and Lena's words about explorers who could go anywhere if they stuck together. They had explored further than either of them had ever imagined possible, and in the process, they had helped create a world where other explorers could think freely. As she walked out of the hotel that had once been her hiding place and was now her platform for change, Naomi Brooks, former fugitive, former janitor, current guardian of human cognitive liberty, looked forward to whatever challenges tomorrow might bring. The work of protecting freedom would never be finished, but for the first time in years, she was no longer facing it alone. What would you sacrifice to protect someone you love, your safety, your identity, or your very soul? If this story of hidden strength and unbreakable bonds moved you, smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales that will challenge everything you think you know about the people around you.